Hello, everybody, and welcome to part one of a two-part course with Jessica Luffy, which is tongue tie, the hidden limitation destroying singers' technique, progress, and potential. Ms. Luffy is perhaps the world's leading expert at the intersection of vocal performance, oral facial myology, and airway health. And as a young professional opera singer, she discovered the profound impact of orofacial myology and tongue ties on singers, and has since pioneered approaches to bridge between the worlds of voice science, dental airway health, and elite vocal training. So now hand over to Jessica. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to be here because talking about tongue ties is like one of my favorite things to do in the whole world. So we're just going to jump right into it. So tongue tie is a huge hidden underlying issue in singers. In my opinion, it's the biggest one. It's the real true barrier to vocal freedom in singers, in my opinion. I think that improving vocal technique is crucial to everybody in the world, but this really can stop this from happening. Tongue ties can directly affect freedom and ease in singers, also vocal health physically in singers, their range, their breath support, body pain. Oh, and tongue tension. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And honestly, I've been doing this for 8 years and the list gets longer as we go. So vocal technique is super important, but it can't fix a physical limitation that somebody has. Tongue ties, unfortunately, are often overlooked by people who have them themselves, their voice teachers, and even the singing community at large for various reasons. And it can often be misattributed to other things that we think are the problem, like poor technique, or maybe my student isn't understanding like what I'm saying to them, or I don't think my student's been practicing enough, or they would know this better. I mean, I've even had people say things like, oh, that's just acid reflux. That's not really an anatomical issue. It's not a technical issue. It's an anatomical issue that's causing all of these changes in a singer. So when we bring awareness of tongue tie, we can really provide true transformation for singers and even for studios at large, because singers get to understand the root cause of why they've been struggling for their whole lives, despite progressing through like school and even professional careers. They get to release this really deep feeling of like guilt and I'm not good enough and I don't understand. Oftentimes these singers, after their release, they end up practicing more, they double down, they become more dedicated to what they're doing because they feel like they finally have control and freedom. And of course, that allows them to progress faster and in a lasting way, and it can even change their entire careers. Teachers, it's the same sort of thing. We get to have a lot of ease with like understanding why singers have been struggling. And then once we can identify that, we can help them improve faster and also improve their careers as well. So the results are immediate, lasting, and absolutely life-changing. So just a little bit about me really fast. I've worked with Grammy-winning artists. I've worked with like the best of the best opera singers. I've worked with top YAP program attendees and even competitors on like national primetime talent shows. I've worked with some of the best airway doctors, orthodontists, dentists, and myofunctional people in the world. And I have global experience of over 8 years working with people from over 13 amazing countries and still growing. So I had a new one yesterday, so that was pretty cool. And most importantly to me is that we have a really solid track record of some really amazing results. And we're going to meet some of these people today, some of my amazing clients. You will meet both people who are finished with their release and also people who are just starting their tongue tie journey. So you get to meet them secondhand. So what we'll learn today is how to identify tongue ties. So like how to give full-on assessment tools, also how to identify like some of the signs of a tongue tie, and also understanding their effect on people. specific differences between how certain types of tongue ties can affect certain types of people. So both a broad view and a more specific view. And you get to meet some of my clients before and after. And most importantly, I have a big wad of resources and next steps that you can take with you so that you don't feel like overwhelmed with all of this information. So I want to introduce you to my very first client that I ever had. She's very interesting. So at the time, she was an undergraduate pre-professional operatic soprano. She was told often that she was like, quote unquote, talented, but she always talked about how she had no control of her voice or technique despite being in school for it. She would constantly say things like, this is just harder for me than other people. She experienced a lot of slow, frustrating progress, like got told the same things over and over again. And I think people thought she was kind of dumb. And she did make some progress, but she still had really big technical issues that she said just like weren't improving or going away. Pitch problems was a big one. Unfortunately, pitch can bring up some nasty things in the music world, but she had really great ear training results. And she kept overdriving and blowing her sound, and she had really poor vocal endurance. And this person was me. So here I am, my big debut with my amazing wig, as you can see there. This was around 2012 that I started going through this journey myself. And slowly but surely, I became obsessed with tongue ties and this whole process. And I realized that somebody needed to do this for all the singers in the world. And so if nobody was going to do it, I guess I would try. So that's sort of my backstory. Now, before we go further into what specifically tongue ties are, I want to have a short little preface, because today you will probably start off with something like this. And then slowly as we progress and the information keeps mounting, you will probably feel something like this. And I just want to say, it's all right. You're going to have lots of time to process. Just kind of roll with it. Just drink from the fire hose and it'll all be okay. So if you're up later tonight like this, honestly, that's pretty normal, because you feel like, why did nobody tell me about this in my whole life? So we'll talk about that some more later. But without further ado, let's descend down into the rabbit hole of tongue ties. So the truth about them is probably not anything that you think you already know. For example, they affect a singer's mobility, their isolation, their freedom, and their ease as a result of restricting their movement. As we mentioned, they also affect your vocal health and your longevity. They affect progress and learning. And most importantly, they are very common. So what is it? A tongue tie is a fibrous tissue. It's located under the tongue, as you can see here. So here's two different types of tongue tie. The one on the left is obviously much more significant in appearance than the one on the right. But just because they look a certain way doesn't mean that one is necessarily better or worse. It can look like all kinds of things. For example, what about this guy? He doesn't really have a white line. He can lift his tongue up fully. Okay, but what if I actually showed you a before and after? That's a significant amount of change. In fact, that's over 50% improvement. So it's really important when we talk about tongue ties that we're not addressing how they look. Here's one more. This one shows absolutely no signs of any of that white rope or any of those things until we do this. By the way, that's my tongue tie. And as you can see, it's hidden under the tissue of my floor of mouth. So like I said, it's really important that we don't just look at people. We need to do functional mobility tests. We'll talk about that more later. So some quick important facts. They are formed in utero as the fetus progresses. They are genetic. So if you have some questions about your tongue, you should probably start looking at your parents. That's a good place to start. They do not stretch because they're fibrous tissue. They're not skin, they're not organs. They cannot and will not stretch, not in the course of someone's life, not as they grow, not ever. They may look like strings straight up and down, but they are actually more like restrictive nets, more like spider webs on the inside than a rope. They can affect more than one location along a line. And most importantly, you can't see them. Sometimes you can see part of them, but you can't see them. So overview, they're under the tongue. They're located at the junction of the base of the tongue and the floor of mouth, and then they ascend or they continue through the tongue, sometimes to the middle, sometimes all the way through to the tip. It just varies per person. Anatomically, this tissue abuts the anterior edge of the genioglossus muscle. So it starts also where the genioglossus attaches to the mandible. And if you have a short one, it looks something like this. If you have a medium length one that goes through the middle portion of the body of the tongue, and then lastly, it can go into or even extend from the tip of the tongue as well. Here's just another view. It sits here directly in the center of the tongue and then continues up and out depending on the type of tie. Now, it's really important that we talk about tongue ties and the genioglossus together, because not only does the tie abut the genioglossus, but it directly affects the movement of the genioglossus, which is incredibly important. So let's just have a really quick review of the genioglossus muscle. So the genioglossus, this red big fan here, is the largest of the tongue muscles, both intrinsically and extrinsically. It creates the biggest portion muscularly of the tongue. It is big and fan shaped like so. It is an extrinsic muscle because it originates here at the mandible and then it attaches to the hyoid bone, but it's also an intrinsic muscle because it also attaches to other tongue muscles in the course of this fan shape. So that's something that makes this really fascinating and also makes this more complicated and has a lot of other relationships to the whole area because it is both extrinsic and intrinsic. We're going to talk about that more in a second, but I just want you to remember the origin and these attachments because that's going to matter in a few moments. So, tongue ties directly affect mobility of the tongue. If you have a short one, it can affect this posterior body of the tongue. Here's just a brief little overview of the area it's affecting. If you have a medium length one, it's affecting the posterior and the mid body of the tongue. And if you have a long one, it's affecting basically the entire body of the tongue. So as I mentioned, the type of tie that someone has can affect the type of symptoms that they have. So obviously, in this scenario, we're going to talk about singing symptoms, but I want to just have like a little side note that there are different kinds of human body symptoms as well that correspond with each type of tie. But for the sake of time, let's just talk about the singing ones. So in singers, a posterior body restriction most commonly has, it prohibits the back of the tongue from lifting superiorly. And its most common symptoms for this area is that it affects the clarity and the height of closed vowels, most commonly E. It also affects various consonant clarity and speed, mostly NG, G, and K, but even achlaut as well. It also really affects double tonguing in instrumentalists. I have a great video for this in just 1 second. And most importantly, for a lot of sopranos out there, it really affects the placement and the spin and the freedom of high note pockets, regardless of what your technique is, whether it's forward, whether it's back, whether it's Germanic, whether it's Italianate, whether it's operatic, it doesn't matter. It's affecting certain pitch points in that upper register in sopranos, but also in all voices as well, tenor, basses, and even countertenors. And what's interesting is that this portion of the tongue can also stop the correct engagement of breath support and the correct firing of the pelvic floor, which seems wild, I know, but we're going to talk about that more in the second part of my lecture later. So for now, oh, of course, there is more. These are just the most common symptoms. So now we're going to have a little listen to one of my clients who is a professional oboist. And we're going to listen to her double tonguing, which is where you use a G noise followed by a T noise very quickly in succession. So let's have a listen.
144 double tongue. Double tonguing 144. Double tongue.
So fascinating, right? This isn't even a singer, and we can already hear the changes in the mobility happening. So I want to bring your attention to some specific aspects of this listening. I'm sure that you heard the increased clarity of the double tonguing, but did you also hear the clarity on the higher pitches as she went up? The ring and the spin of the higher pitches was also increased as well. So we're going to have all of this is created by allowing the posterior tongue to move further more quickly, aka increasing the posterior tongue's mobility. So let's have another little listen and see if we can hear all of these things happening.
144 double tongue. Double tonguing 144.
Lovely. So if you can hear those changes, or even if you hear something else, go ahead and type it into the chat, because I love getting comments from people as we go through this. So, but I do want to give you a singer example. So this next video is one of my current clients. She has not done her tongue tie release yet, but I want to show you what's happening in the posterior portion of her tongue when I ask her to perform an E vowel. Thank you. You're not gonna like doing any of these things. But can I see you, please? Give me a big smile and then open wide. And then without moving your bottom jaw, I want to watch you make a G plus an E noise. G, G, G. You try. G, G, G. Relax. Now, I know this is really weird, but can I have you try to make that as clean of an E vowel as possible? Okay. I know you kind of can't, okay? Try again. G, 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 G. That's it. Sorry. Sorry. That's hilarious. Good job.
I know, that was sweet. You did a great job. Good. I am setting these things up so that you fail on purpose because I want to show people that you can't do it. So thank you for being a good sport. F sharp. Yeah, I can hear some gravel.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And this was another thing. When I was studying, my teacher said, "Oh, maybe you have acid reflux," and that's what I used to think that was. Yeah. Then I was glugging Gaviscon Advanced all the time. Oh, God. Anyway, let's carry on. Yeah.
I'm just like, this is just, I get so mad because I'm like, really? Acid reflux on only F sharp?
Exactly. Hello. Split.
Jessica, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Just some of the audio, the high note, the very, very high, it's just dropping out. Is your original sound on?
One moment. Let's see. Yeah, I can re-put that back on. My original sound is on, but I can turn my input down and try again. Shall we try again? All right. So let's start at where she was just singing again, perhaps. One moment. Okay.
So that you fail on purpose. So thank you. I can hear some gravel.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And this was another thing. When I was studying, my teacher said, "Oh, maybe you have acid reflux," and that's what I used to think that was. Yeah. Then I was glugging Gaviscon Advanced all the time. Oh, God. Anyway, let's carry on. Yeah.
I'm just like, this is just, I get so mad because I'm like, really? Acid reflux on only F sharp?
Exactly. Hello.
Jessica, sorry. Somebody said the audio is worse now. So
Oh,
yeah.
all right. Well, then we'll just have to do a verbal description. So as she's going up, you can hear her tone falling out of the pocket, even though her larynx isn't what's bobbing and her tongue isn't either. It's creating this distortion, this sort of fuzziness on her tone, basically. And she was saying that it only happens on certain pitch points. And she'd been all around the world trying to figure out what this was. And the closest answer that she ever got was that it was acid reflux. So we're going to continue on. This was, I think, the loudest one that I have. So let me know if the sound is not good moving forward. Sorry. Let's continue.
Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about the middle portion of the tongue. So if you have a tongue tie that's medium length, it affects this mid portion. Most common symptoms in singers is the height of open vowels. So even though the root of the tongue is what's creating the vowel, this portion of the tongue is crucial to getting good clarity and height of the vowel as well. It also affects certain consonants, mainly rolled R. So that's a big red flag. If you have a student that can't roll their R, it's probably a tongue tie. In fact, in other countries, namely Brazil, if you can't roll your R, they automatically send you to go get a tongue tie release because they send you to speech therapy. But because we live in the American society, in the English speaking society, and the British society, we don't have that sound. So we don't consider it part of our like base level of speech. Fun fact. This also affects the freedom and ease and especially pain in the anterior neck in singers. So if they ever do anything like this, that's a red flag. Or if they stretch their neck, that's a red flag. This also affects breath support. Specifically, people talk about getting a full breath in or full breath out. They feel like they really can't control specifically the rib motion in breath support as opposed to the posterior tongue, which is more of the pelvic floor. And this is a huge one. It really affects pitch accuracy and placement in the upper passaggio in all voices. People very commonly fall flat, or the only way that they can get it in tune is to really drive the sound and the air into that pocket in the front. And it also affects fast coloratura and melismas. I have met a few coloraturas who said, oh, I'm a really light soprano. I can go up really, really high, but I can't move fast enough to call myself a coloratura. So I've been having a lot of trouble like placing myself in a fach. And then they get their tongue tie release done. And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna sing Lucia now. Bam, just like that. Pretty wild. So this, of course, includes all of the posterior symptoms, because this tongue tie is also affecting this portion of the tongue as well. So if you have a mid tie, you also have a posterior tie. Now, you may have a collection of symptoms between the mid tongue and the posterior tongue. You may not have all of them, you may have some of them, or perhaps you only notice your symptoms from the mid tongue, but that doesn't mean that it's not affecting your posterior tongue as well. So let's try again. Here is a couple of my clients talking about this rib expansion trouble that they're having.
And you probably tell me, because I know you're aware, do you have trouble on the inhale with the ribs, or do you have trouble controlling them on the exhale?
It's both.
Okay.
I always feel like it's restricted. I can't get any more air in, and then I feel like when I'm singing, then it's like
right away, but my speaking is different, and my singing as well. The air doesn't stop like it did before.
I think it's fascinating how much tongue ties affect breath support.
Yeah,
I think it's so interesting.
and because of that, the chords are thinner,
And it's easier.
voila. Yeah, yeah.
Right, all the things. Yeah.
I didn't sing a lot. I still didn't sing a lot, but I noticed the difference, right? And people say that my talking is different. So.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So here's two examples of two very different fachs and even ages and even genres of singers, and they're all using the same words. The air is stopping. My body can't control it. They do a lot of external words. I can't stop it. It's being stopped. It won't do it. That's a very common thread amongst people who are tongue-tied and maybe don't even realize it. So let's finish out this section by talking about tongue tip. So these ones are a lot more obvious. You're going to get a lot of trouble with patter and with consonant clarity and articulation, specifically the more the tempo increases. Enunciation of Italianate consonants, la 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 la, things like that are very common. Rapid tonguing amongst instrumentalists. These people also have a lot of jaw involvement, and they really don't like opening. They like to sing like this with their teeth like barely apart. And every time they move the tongue in the front, it will distort and change the position of the tongue in the back. So these people really struggle not only with consonants, but also changing their vowel shape every time they make a consonant. Now, of course, this includes mid-tongue and posterior as well, because if you have a tongue tip tie, you're also tied in the posterior tongue. So here's a picture of someone who doesn't appear to have a tongue tip tie on first inspection, but can you notice this heart-shaped dip here? So even though we don't see a line, we don't see any white rope there, she is restricted in the tip, because when I ask her to lift her tongue, I get this lily pad shape. And here's her afterwards. Notice how the whole tongue sits nice and skinny, and now she can get a point to her tongue. So even though the tie is inside the tissue of the tongue, it's not on the surface and we can't see it, it's affecting the mobility and the motion of the tongue and the shape of the tongue as well. So even though we just addressed her tongue tip, here's an example of her posterior change before and after. So when I ask her to lift the entire portion of the tongue, not just the front, you can see that she can open her whole jaw quite a bit more as well. So again, we're not just affecting her tongue tip, but we're also getting posterior changes as well because they're all linked. So let's talk a little bit more about this posterior aspect of the tongue, because there's a lot of other things that are going on there that are crucial for singing. So this fan shape in the genioglossus, we're going to talk about, again, like I mentioned, the origin. The origin is here. And the reason this is important is that in the golden rules of muscle movement, the origin point is what remains relatively stationary during contraction as we move. And the insertion points is what moves. So in this case, the insertion points are all along that fan shape, starting at the hyoid and continuing all the way up into various and multiple tongue muscles. Now, this really matters because if you have a tongue tie that is affecting this area, you're not able to get movement in those insertion points. They're not going to move. And this is really crucial because there's a lot of other things in that area besides just the genioglossus, as you can see from this picture: styloglossus, hyoglossus. We're not going to talk about all of them, but we're going to talk about some of the big hitters. So here's another view of this. This tongue tie is affecting this posterior portion of the tongue, but because it can't move in an upwards direction, right? The insertion point can't move upwards. Something else has to move upwards instead because the origin can't move here. So something else has to move, and it's going to be the entire floor of the mouth, including the larynx. And it brings this whole portion up in a lifted way. This is something that is very common in singers. They always do things like this. They'll massage the larynx back down. You'll even hear the larynx rise, 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 rise as they continue to sing over the course of an hour. And then they totally top out and they either have to like stop singing or speaking entirely, or they have to swallow. There's lots of examples of this. So this laryngeal symptoms, common ones are that they have a chronic high larynx. Even during rest, these people are often accused of like having a mismatch between their speaking voice and their singing voice. For example, I had a bass at a very prestigious YAP program, and even though it didn't affect his range while singing, his endurance was a little bit low. He could only do about an hour and a half, but luckily for basses, that's not very common anyway. But the biggest thing was that he talked like a tenor. And people were always kind of surprised when he walked into a room and he started singing. And then as soon as he got his tongue tie release done, he goes, "Hello, Jessica," when he comes in. So it's fascinating that this can affect people both on and off the stage. Another one is cracking or gagging. I had a soprano actually who could reach full range, but every once in a while she would absolutely just like totally crack out of it. These effects are very marked, but they can also be a little bit smaller where people just talk about it. Even if you can't hear it, it can go both ways. These people very much experience poor vocal endurance, especially if they have to ride in their upper registers. That is absolutely not happening. And they often experience a lot of tension and a lot of pain on their higher pitches even after they stop singing, they'll still feel tension and pain for some minutes afterwards. And unfortunately, these people very often experience really profound vocal injuries and even recurring vocal injuries. And they also experience posterior neck pain. They may get headaches. They may get singing-induced migraines. It may sound kind of silly, but this is very common in my world of muscular relationships. So let's see an example.
Yeah, I think you said that early on before this, you know, that we would just be given another option, and like that's really how it feels. I mean, but yeah, it feels, it's a pretty big deal. My dad has the same tongue I used to have, and he constantly loses his voice. I was telling him like, you need to cut that. Like you lost your voice. He's like, I'm too old for that. But I see it. I'm like, wait, no, he takes so much, and that's exactly where I was going. That's what I was doing. And now to be able to just speak so easily, honestly, it's like a game changer. The fact that I don't lose my voice on a whim is like crazy. It's insane. If you had lived the past year with me, I mean, it's like, it's the way it felt here was so awful. And now it's like, there's, you know.
Well, you know what? I noticed first of all, your speaking voice does sound different to me. But second of all, I also noticed that when you used to talk, you couldn't speak like sentences in a row. You would have to like kind of like pause and swallow and like give it a little mini break before you kept going. So it's fascinating to see that.
So my client here, you're going to meet him again later because he experienced some really profound vocal injuries, but we're going to talk about him more in a second. So we talked about the laryngeal involvement, but we're also going to talk about in this posterior portion of the tongue, there is also a big area that affects the palatoglossus. Now, the palatoglossus is not directly a soft palate muscle, but it is very closely linked to the soft palate muscles. So even though it's not directly lifting the soft palate, it indirectly prohibits that area from lifting. So here's another example, or excuse me, another photo of this. Here's your palatoglossus, as you can see, and it's affecting this whole soft palate area from lifting in a superior way. So common soft palate symptoms that show up in persons who are tongue-tied are poor lift, as in their soft palate is sort of semi-lifted or half lifted, or the palate will go up fully, but then it collapses at certain times, or as phrases progress, it will slowly fall or collapse. Or perhaps people who can only lift their soft palate on certain vowels, for example, ah and oo, but they can't lift their palate on e, and it becomes e, as opposed to e. That's a common one because we know posterior people don't like e vowels. They often have very poor control of their soft palate or little to no isolation of the soft palate. And they can lift it, but only if their teeth are closed, which is a big problem for high notes because they need space, but they can't open their jaw and lift the palate at the same time. Here's an example of one of my clients. He talks specifically about this problem that he had with his soft palate.
It's interesting to like, feel all of this and watch how things change after the tie is released, because I'm trying to work on lifting my soft palate without engaging any of the root of my tongue, because before that was very connected. Yeah, it's just interesting, like the independence that I'm starting to feel in certain things now that the tie is released.
Yeah.
It's nice. A long time ago, one of my teachers that was really helpful, like of all the teachers I had, probably the most helpful, I remember one lesson, she was like, you need to you need to work on getting your soft palate to raise. Like it's not really moving a lot. And so she just had me stand in front of the mirror and be like,
Yep. Yeah.
and that took me a long time to cultivate. But before the tie, when I would do that, I would definitely feel the back of the tongue pulling down and back.
So did you catch a lot of the things that he said? Before, my teacher noticed that I had to work on lifting my soft palate. So she gave me isolatory exercises to lift my soft palate. And I could do it. But now after the release, I can feel the independence in all of these structures now. Now I can feel when my palate goes up, how my tongue tries to go down and back because that's what it always did. It's fascinating to hear these people talk because they say all the exact words and feelings of what's going on in the body. So these singers are not crazy when they talk about tongue tension here or even having migraines in the back. These are real experiences that they're having, and they're actually anatomically accurate. So just to recap this whole little section, I like to use the elevator analogy when we talk about the relationship between the tongue and the soft palate and the larynx. Healthy vocal production in all genres of singing requires oppositional movement, meaning we require all the things to stretch in various directions all at the same time. So the tongue and the soft palate go up and the larynx goes down, right? We're requiring all these structures to stretch apart from each other. But if they can't stretch, this little elevator becomes an elevator of death, which looks more like this. And this is what people talk about on the inside. They talk about this motion of everything going up and down and jumping around. And of course, this causes a lot of tension, a lot of pain, and totally ruins endurance because you either have to pick one. Either the larynx is going up with the soft palate, or the larynx is staying down, but the soft palate's getting dragged too. All of these things have to choose one overall motion, usually in quick succession, or they just don't have the ability for everything to move in the direction that it should be. So here is one of my clients talking about this exact phenomenon. She has not gotten her tongue tie release yet, so she has not experienced any of these feelings, and yet she uses all of these words perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's bad. So
You're wild. Yeah.
after rehearsals, I'll just get like a pounding headache. And it doesn't matter if I take ibuprofen or something, like it doesn't fix. I know it's because there's just so much tension going.
Yeah, so much up, down, all around. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you catch some of the words that she used? She has migraines, headaches from after singing. This is a full-blown professional. She does cruise ship work. And if you're familiar with cruise ships, that is a lot of hours in one day. And even after one short rehearsal, she'll have migraines and headaches. And did you catch that even though she doesn't know like specifically what structures are bothering her, she does things like this, right? She uses all the same motions. And she says, there's just so much tension. It doesn't matter that I take ibuprofen because the tension is still there. She's still experiencing residual pain even after she stops moving because it's had such a ringer. So, quick takeaway, these tongue ties restrict movement in both the tongue and in other relational aspects. And this then forces compensations to happen. And of course, this has a huge effect on vocal technique, because if you can't move, if you can't do the thing, then you're not going to improve. It affects strength, it affects isolation, certainly, and most important, mobility. It also has a huge effect on endurance. Again, the elevator, you can't survive like that for very long. It often incites vocal injury because when we misuse our bodies, whether we're doing it consciously or not, really bad things are going to happen. In fact, even if you heal, they're going to happen again. And unfortunately, this breaks my heart, but it's so common that I see quite a lot of singers and even humans who have already been to voice therapy multiple times. They're full-blown professionals, and yet they still suffer from muscle tension dysphonia, nodes multiple times, and they say things like, I don't understand, my vocal technique is good, I take great care of my voice, I don't do anything bad, and yet this keeps happening to me over and over again. It's because we're not addressing the source of the problem. We keep addressing the cart and not the horse. Also, often these things cause intense physical pain in singers. So I would really urge you that if you teach and you have singers who are in pain, they need to understand that this is not common and this is not something that's just normal to them. Singing should not ever be painful, not at hour 1, not at hour 2, not at hour 4. You don't have to live like this. So here's my client again. He's going to tell us the rest of his fascinating story.
They found a polyp, and I scheduled with another doctor that was a specialist with singers, but she still said, yeah, you'll need surgery. This does not heal on its own. Everything online, people had said they spent 3 months silent and it didn't disappear. I can't afford 3 months of silence. So I guess I have to do it. And this doctor's telling me that even that won't do it. So I scheduled surgery, and that was 3 weeks late.
Oops.
And in those 3 weeks, I did talk. I sang, I whatever. The week before surgery, we went into scope and we couldn't see the polyp. She scopes me and she's like, no, it's gone. And I have the images. I think I sent you and all. Wow. So it's like in 3 weeks, it disappears without me. I mean, I was speaking, but I was by no means being conservative with my voice use.
Vocally, gosh, I literally have goosebumps. That's just wild.
It's wild.
I mean, you can't prove that it was the tongue tie, but like, holy cow, that's one heck of a coincidence, right?
It's the only thing that
else
changed.
Could it be? Right, it's the only
Exactly.
thing that changed. So if you remember this client from before, he was talking about how he always had tension and endurance problems just speaking as a human. So in fact, he had been to speech therapy multiple times already throughout his life for his talking voice because they assumed that that was what the issue was. And then as he continued to progress in his singing, he would spend days silent while talking, and then his singing would still suffer and he would still have all of the same issues. And as you just saw, he was diagnosed with polyp again, by the way. And he went for surgery, and he got diagnosed with a polyp right before he had his tongue tie release surgery. He got his tongue tie release surgery done. He continued to sing and his polyp disappeared. So by getting a tongue tie release instead of polyp surgery, now he no longer has any speaking issues or any singing issues because we finally found the root cause of what was causing all of these issues.
They found a polyp, and
excuse me. Next.
I scheduled with another doctor.
Come on.
They found a polyp, and
there you go. Okay. So red flags to look for. We've talked about some of the specific symptoms of tongue tie. You are welcome to use those, but here's a really brief overview of like really big red flags of when you should stop and look for a tongue tie. If a singer can gain knowledge and understanding of vocal technique, if they understand the finer points, but they can't actually do it, if they can't execute their skills fully, or if they can't do it in a consistent way, that's a great time to assess them for a tongue tie. If they often say that they're confused or they're really frustrated with their bodies or their voice, that's a great red flag. If singers avoid practicing, now I know a lot of teachers don't want to hear this. Practicing is a discipline. It is an emotional thing, but it could also be a physical thing. I know for me, myself, I avoided practicing because I felt like, what's the point? I go in there and it's like telling me to roll double six on dice for an hour. It's pointless. So if you have students like that, you may want to talk to them about this. Also, these singers very often use external terminology to talk about what's frustrating them. We saw some of this earlier, right? It's blocking me. Something is going on in here, right? Something, they put it outside of themselves. Something is grabbing, it's stopping me. That block, they use words very common to this. Even when they talk about their technique, they will own that as part of their identity, and this remains outside of them as a separate entity. Here's an example.
I think you already know, and you should trust yourself more, because all the words that you use when you talk to me, like you just say, I can't control it, it won't do this, it's stopping me. Everything that you choose is this way. I know it's not this way, right? So even your body understands that there is something that is stopping you, which I totally agree with, and I can see it and I can hear it.
So again, here's my client who experienced acid reflux on only F and F sharp, right? But when she would talk about it with me, she would just say, but something happens up there. I can't get it to get out of my way. I can't get it to help me. Very, very common terminology. So if any of these things kind of sound familiar, if they remind you of somebody, perhaps a student, perhaps a famous singer that you may have heard them speak, or maybe even yourself, I want to say that, again, tongue ties are a lot more common than you think that they are. So here's one of my wonderful clients. Oh, excuse me. Yes, they're much more common than you are. If you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, they're everywhere. This is a very common thing that people feel once they know how to find tongue ties and what they cause. They're like, I'm seeing tongue ties everywhere. It's not that they showed up overnight. It's just that you weren't noticing them before. So let's talk about the difference between common and normal. It is not normal to have a tongue tie. It's not ideal to have a tongue tie. We shouldn't have tongue ties, but they are very common. For example, wearing glasses is very common. So here is my client. She's a fabulous teacher. And when she first found out about tongue ties, not only did it affect her personally in her personal journey, but since she's a teacher, it also affected how she related to her students. So let's hear about this.
But if you're anything like me, when I first learned about mine, I was immediately thinking, I had student after student after student of mine that I thought, wow, I'll bet, I can't wait to do the assessment with them, because I suspect there's something going on. And for all but one student, I nailed it, because I know them. I know what the things they're going through. So I really hope it's of use to you. I hope it's of use to your students. In terms of the singing aspect, repertoire changes can be made. Expectations can be released about what maybe, how much they can attain in a certain area of enunciation or a certain area of this or that. But at least they have the information and they can say, you know what, I'm good. I'm good just like this, and I don't want to do anything about it. You know, and then you make choices then, but there's not this unnecessary frustrating grief and trying to force something or figure out something that isn't to be figured out through technique.
So I think she said that, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. I think she said that so well, you know, like we're not here to tell everybody, oh, you have a tongue tie, you got to get that taken care of or it's going to ruin your life. No, what we're saying is you have a tongue tie. Here's how it's affecting you. All of these things that you're feeling are real. They're valid. They are inhibiting your technique and your motion. And we can make some changes to help you negotiate around that. Or we can potentially explore releasing you so that you can do these things in a free and healthy way. And I love what she said about how she immediately thought of specific people, because we as teachers, we know them, we know their struggles. So if you have a singer who has chronic struggles in a specific area, again, that's a very common red flag, and I suggest that you assess them for a tongue tie. Now, not only do tongue ties affect physical health and physical mobility and vocal technique, but they have a huge impact on mental health indirectly. Singers very often are confused or frustrated with their body and their voice because they think that they're doing something wrong. They think they need to practice more. They don't understand why they can't progress. They are often told the same like technique things over and over and over, and it becomes very frustrating for them. They'll say things like, I did it yesterday and today it doesn't work. Or if you do the same vocalese 3 times in a row, they'll do it the first time, but not the second 2. They also will say things like, well, it's just not easy for me. Singing isn't free, it never has been. Like they can do it like that, but I can't. Again, these singers often avoid practicing because why bother? I don't have any control. They are also very confused about like the idea of vocal technique in general, because they don't understand that technique can give them results every single time because they don't experience that. They don't experience getting the same result every single time. They hear about it, but to them, it's like a unicorn. They don't think that it's real. And unfortunately, these people are very often looked down on and considered inferior singers and inferior artists and students. And I have had people show up to my waiting room to get a consult done, and they just absolutely bawl their hearts out at the sheer relief of knowing that a tongue tie is not their fault and that their progression through life has been inhibited not by something that they didn't do, because these people are just as dedicated and they're just as committed to this career, but they don't get to receive a lot of the rewards that they are due. And this can be very like heartbreaking to people. They will say things like, I'm not as talented. I guess I'm not cut out to be a professional singer. Or perhaps people even say things like that to them. You know, like this career is really hard and maybe you should consider some other things, especially if these people have been studying for long periods of time and that one technical skill won't get better. They very, very often consider and do end up quitting. So here is my client again. She is a fabulous soprano. And she's a perfect example because one of the only symptoms that she shows is that she can't sing an F natural 5 and an F sharp 5 without having hoarseness. And it's wild because as a soprano, when are you going to sing an operatic role that does not require at least one F5? Never. But she's so frustrated because this one thing people keep bringing up in all of her competitions and her arias, and she can't progress in her career. So here's her talking about it.
Would you quitting?
Of course, yeah. I've had enough. I've already left my job at enough. What day is it today?
Right.
On Tuesday. Yeah, I left. I'll be done with it. I've had some interviews for, which is crazy, for office work already. I don't know. Because I've had enough of doing auditions and struggling, and it's too much. And I told you, my self-worth has been built so much because of this, because I know what I've been going through. I know, oh God, I wish I could hug you, Jessica. Oh, so yeah, that's one thing that's been amazing through this, that my self-belief is is high, but there's only so much that I can take, really.
So unfortunately, this is a story that I hear very often. I am fortunate enough to catch people who are still in the early stages of their careers, but I unfortunately see a lot of older singers whose careers have already passed, or who quit their careers some time ago because of things like this. So I really want to drive this point. I get so emotional, but I really want to drive this point home for people, that it is not your fault that you can't do these things. It's not that you don't understand. It's not that you're not smart enough. It's not that you don't practice enough. It's that people assume that we are all born with the same tongues that can do the same things, and we're just not. This is not an equal playing field. And the sooner that we realize that, we can really grant full understanding and fairness and freedom to the vocal community.
I had a little bit of soreness the next day. But I felt as if a lifelong, subtle but chronic trauma that I'd been living with my whole life had just dissolved away. And that was really striking to me, that the day after, I just had under my tongue snipped, and my cheeks, inside my cheeks and my lips, that what was the most overwhelming, because there was a little bit of soreness, what was so overwhelming was that this thing that I lived with my whole life, that was just this subtle grabbing in my body, just was gone. And that was the stronger feeling inside me. That was what was most obvious.
So this is another thing I think is fascinating, is that very often in the chair, when people are getting their tongue tie release done, they can actually feel things happening in their body as it happens. I've seen people burst into tears in the chair because they feel the tension and pain leave their body that had been with them on a low but constant level throughout their whole life, and having that release of not only just physical pain, but also that wall blocking them from progressing is not to be underestimated. So let's talk about tongue tie releases. What I like to say, AKA changing your whole life and your whole career in just 1 hour. So this is a surgery, but I don't like to say that word because people automatically panic. But this surgery is sort of like getting a filling done in your tooth. Most commonly, it's performed by dentists, not ENTs. We're going to talk about that more in a second. Dentists, airway dentists, are really your go-to people. What should you expect? It takes about an hour, usually less. They do local numbing only, which means they don't put you to sleep. There's no full anesthesia. You can drive yourself home. The pain is usually mild to medium, meaning you're in resting pain if you're watching TV and eating. You can still talk. You can still sing without hurting yourself. This usually lasts about 48 hours, and then you really only feel it when you're doing your stretches and things. People very commonly sing full out about 5 days after. They perform and do high-level auditions about 3 weeks after. And most importantly, for all of us singers, it's very common that this can be covered by medical and or dental insurance, meaning that you can get part of it covered by medical and potentially part of it covered by dental so that you don't pay anything. That's pretty great. And on average, this costs about $1,000 to $2,000 or pounds for you all. Here is an example of, this is actually not one of my clients that I worked with before the release. I just saw him afterwards. So you get like a little preview into what his release was like.
So I have a lot of amazing stories to hear from you, I think. Do you want to tell me a little bit about your surgery?
Yes. So I had a super quick one. It was not rough at all. I thought this was going to be a lot bigger of a deal than it was, because everyone that I spoke with, like all the other singer people that had done it, were like knocked out and they were out of commission. Yeah, no, like they were just kind of over it and they didn't get to do all these things. So I got to do a bunch of things straight out of surgery. I was going out, I was going places, I was talking to people on the phone. It was great. I was taking notes. I was very awake, very cognizant of everything. So I had my surgery and I immediately got to work on everything I needed to do. So I wasn't like out of commission, and the recovery for speech was not that bad. I just had, you know, like some swelling and some tension that I could feel, but it wasn't noticeable, like you couldn't see it. But the coolest thing that I found, that I'm sure you've heard, I had like tension on my back teeth and didn't know it. So now I had like a little, like it just felt cool to like not have anything on my back teeth, which I didn't realize was a thing. So that was not something I was expecting to feel, but it's great that I don't anymore. So that was like the coolest thing that I learned from all of this. So that was like the biggest thing I noticed day one. Also, with having tongue tension and having tongue spasms, they went away instantly, gone. Nothing.
So that is one of my favorite parts about this, because he had chronic tongue tension and he had tongue spasm, where he would be going along singing about and it would just like flop all over the place. And he got his tongue tie release done and nothing. Perfect. Relaxed all the time. And it sounds like witchcraft, but it's not. Although it still does feel almost too good to be true, even for me 8 years later, but it is true. And these results are incredible and they're lasting. It's just fascinating. So let's talk about how the whole release process goes, how long it takes. There's lots of different timelines depending on who your myofunctional therapist is, who your doctor is. Some people do about 2 months start to finish. Some people do a year. I personally think that's ridiculous. In my office, we're very fast, we're very hardcore, because I want to get people living their new amazing lives as quickly as possible. So with a lot of dedication, we can do everything in 10 weeks, start to finish. Weeks 1 through 5, we prepare people for surgery. You are actually an active participant in surgery. You have to hold different positions. We need to make sure that you're muscularly strong enough to do so. And then somewhere around week 5 is when you will go get your release done. Again, about an hour, you walk right out. You can eat whatever you want. And then weeks 6 through 10, we do some rehab. We put some muscle back into your tongue. We make sure that you're comfortable with all your new habits. If you would like to, we also do like some singing rehab where we teach you that you now have new choices and new options to make in your technique. That's always really fun. So this thing is, this is very quick and a very easy, simple way for you to change your whole body and your whole life. So how do you start? Well, The first and most important thing is that you want to find a myofunctional therapist. You don't want to find the surgeon first, because the myofunctional therapist is going to be your best friend throughout this whole process. And actually, they should be the ones that are finding your surgeon, because they know who to ask, what to ask, what kind of like laser they use, really specific things. You want to make sure that you have a myofunctional therapist on your team who is really stellar. So that should be your primary goal. And then they will prepare you for surgery. This entails you just doing various exercises. It takes about 5 minutes a day. They're not very hard. They're just kind of weird. Like, for example, one of them is this. Pretty silly, but it still works. Yeah. So about 5 minutes a day, again, for weeks 1 through 5. And then around week 5 in my office, you get released about an hour. And then for weeks 6 through 10, you do your rehab exercises, another 5 minutes a day. For example, one of them is this. Right? So it's not hard, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And frankly, it's just silly not to. And that's it. You get to live your new, glorious, amazing life forever. And as I tell all of my people, come see me, work your butt off, and then go live your great life and never see me ever again. And just send me postcards from the Met. Yeah? Okay. Here's another example of one of my clients talking about the release process itself.
I would say do the preparatory work, which is working with a myofunctional therapist, which is finding a good professional to do it, and do it. I didn't see any adverse effects, you know. I think the worst case scenario would have been, and I think you walked me through all this too, it would have been that nothing changed, you know. But nothing bad has come of this. So I don't know, I guess, I don't know. I remember reading horror stories, but I can't imagine any room for that in the experience I had, you know, of being so like taken care of in each corner. So I would just say, I think if you prepare properly, there's no risk. Worst case scenario, nothing changed. And something did change. So I would say try it out and see if it benefits you. But
yeah. You know, my almost 9 years now, I've never met one person where everything stayed the same.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not as in it as you know, or Dr.
Of course you are. You're right at the center. Come
well,
on.
I mean, that's true. But I mean, I haven't met like 30 people who have done this. So I guess who am I to say that nothing can go wrong? But I just don't. I think it's when you're under good care, like, you know what I mean, you'll be steered in the right direction, and there's yeah. So I don't think there's anything to be really afraid of.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really want to remind people of. Yes, this is a surgery because tongue ties don't stretch. You have to release them manually, but there's not anything to be afraid of. We wouldn't normally stay up, you know, for a week straight and not sleep because we needed a filling done. You owe it to yourself to give yourself the chance at living life as wonderfully as everybody else does. And if that only takes 10 weeks and 1 hour of your time, to me, that is absolutely worth it without a moment's hesitation. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I just want to let you all know that I have tons of free resources on my website, including how to take the tongue-tie test if you want to use that for your students, lists of surgeons, how to find a myofunctional therapist. You don't have to work with me. I just want to provide these things for you because I want to do a service to the singing community because it's so important to me. So I have lots of FAQs, lots of before and afters, even free exercises, a free link to my app. There's all kinds of things here. And if for some reason you find something you don't find something there that you want an answer to, I also have a contact form and you can let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm providing as much as I can for you all. There's also PubMed articles. There's also further reading. There's science, there's studies. It's all there. So you can check that out later. So before we wrap up, I want to bust a few more myths that we didn't get to. We talked about some of them, like how tongue ties don't stretch, not as you grow, not as you get older, not if you fall with your face against the pavement. Yeah. Here's some more of them. A tongue tie release will not change your natural voice color, because remember, we're only changing your mobility, your movement. Now it can, by giving you more freedom in your movement, give you more overtone, more spin, more loftability, because you can use your soft palate, a better balance of the chiaroscuro. There's all kinds of wonderful things that can come from this, but the color of your voice is not going to change, because it just eliminates compensations and allows freedom. Again, we're remembering our elevator, right? We're eliminating that by allowing things to move independently in an isolatory and free way. Some more myths. This will not change your vocal technique, to the great relief of all the voice teachers out there. You will still have the option to do all of the same technique that you've always done if you would like to. The only difference is that getting a tongue tie release gives you options that you don't have now, right? The elevator, we're allowing you to move in new free ways in an independent way without compensation, which you might not be able to do right now. You can continue to use all the same technique and skills that you already have if you would like. In fact, it's very often singers say things to me like, oh, my teacher talked about this specific skill and now I just do it because I understood it, but I couldn't do it. So now I just do it. And what's even funnier is that they'll say things like, oh yeah, I do it. And now I understand what people talk about when they say keeping it forward. Now I feel what people say or what people mean when they say keeping it skinny through the passaggio. I feel all of these things that I used to just hear and not understand. It's fascinating. So it allows people to perform tasks that they understood intellectually but couldn't execute, especially things that they can't execute consistently. So, as we mentioned, tongue ties don't stretch. This will not get better on its own. In fact, it usually gets worse as people age. Let's think of like great Olympic sports. How many of them are 18? How many of them are 20? How many of them are 35 or 40? They are there, but there's not as many. And it's not because they're not as strong. It could be because they're not as flexible, for example, gymnasts. But I love talking about Federer, for example, one of the greatest tennis athletes of all time. He was at the top of his game and continued to be at the top of his game as he aged. And what's fascinating about him is that his injury record is the lowest. Because when he plays, he has absolutely nothing else besides pure technique all the time. So when we're younger, we don't notice tongue ties as much because these compensations don't limit us in such a noticeable way. We can beat ourselves up a little bit more. We can force our way around it. And then as we age, we cannot force our way around it anymore. And it really starts debilitating us. So that's another red flag that you can look for. Again, it doesn't stretch. I can't say this enough. It doesn't stretch. And you can't technique your way out of a tongue tie, because you may understand that the soft palate has to go up and the larynx has to go down, but your body physically can't do it. You may understand it, but you can't do it. And in fact, it usually gets worse. So let's talk about how to assess people and how to find tongue ties, because I know you're all like itching for this. So let's go through it. Here is myself before my lovely tongue tie release. And I had what is sometimes called a hidden tongue tie, where you can't see it at all on the outside here, right? Nothing, just nice little pink tongue. And then here, when I press the floor of my mouth down, you can really see it sticking out. So we cannot look for ties. So if we can't look, how are we going to find them? Well, we're going to find them by testing for function or mobility. Yes, mobility and isolation, two amazing things that every singer needs to be healthy. So this has a couple different steps to it. We're going to do it all together. You're welcome to follow along on the screen. You're welcome to follow along with me. You may need to watch yourself in the video camera. So if you need to like turn your little thing on so you can see yourself, you will need to see yourself, or use your phone, something like that. All right. So there's 4 steps. It takes about 90 seconds. So you have no excuse. Ready? All right, let's find out. Are you tongue-tied? Oh, don't stress. It may be a great thing to find out you're tongue-tied. Ready? All right, step 1, we're gonna get a baseline. We're gonna see how far you can open your teeth, like so. Big smile, open wide. And as you hold it, you're gonna measure with your fingers. As you can see here, I get about 3 fingers in. It doesn't matter how many fingers you get in. We're just getting a baseline. So smile first, open wide, and measure with your fingers. Great. Remember that number for later. Okay. Step 2. Oh, excuse me. This is still step 1. It's just a visual representation, like so. Okay. This is setting your baseline or your goal. Step 2, we're going to test the tip and the middle of your tongue. So once again, give me a big smile and open wide with your teeth, your tongue touching right behind your top center teeth, and keeping your tongue up there. You're going to measure as well, like so. So touch right behind your top center teeth with the tip of your tongue, and then make sure it's still touching when you open, and measure with your fingers. Now you should be getting the same number as you did on step 1. You should have the same number of fingers. If you do, congratulations, you passed the middle and the tip tongue tie test. Hooray. If you don't, what does that mean? It means that you're already restricted in either the tip or the middle of your tongue. That restriction is inhibiting you to make that upward lift motion. It's restricting your mobility. So if you didn't pass this, we already know that you have a tongue restriction because we haven't even gotten to the posterior part yet. And remember, if you have a middle tie, you also have a posterior restriction as well. So if that's you, raise your hand and say, that's me. Or type it in the chat, that's me. Yeah. If you did pass, yay, congratulations, but you're not out of the woods yet. So let's do the final test together. Ready? Step 3, we're going to test the posterior tongue body, which is, in my opinion, the most important part of the tongue for all the singers. Soft palate, laryngeal position, E vowels, high notes, you know, things that kind of matter. So let's test this together. You're going to give me a big smile, and you're going to make some tongue click noises for me. And then you're going to hold it up 3 seconds before you click. 1, 2, 3, snap. Now you're going to hold it up and you're going to measure. Yeah. So you may need to do a couple of as you go through this. Okay. Make a couple of tongue click noises. Yes, you have to make the noise. You may need to watch yourself in the video for this. That's totally okay. So as you make that suction noise and then you hold up for 3 seconds, and then you're going to measure as you hold that position. Now, it's important to note, I do not have a tongue tie anymore, and I almost get the same number of fingers. I'm about 1/4 of a finger off. It's okay. We're not expecting perfection. But if you go from 3 to like 1, that's like a big change. Yeah. So also all of you middle and tongue tip people, you can also try this because you can see if yours gets tighter as you go back. Like maybe your tongue tip was 2, but then you do the posterior and it's only 1. Oh, yeah. So type in the chat what your overall results were, okay? Because you should have the same number of fingers on all of these steps. Yeah. If you don't, that means that you potentially have a tongue restriction, right? If it's really obvious, you definitely do. Yeah. So let's take a brief moment to compare our results to what we got. So if you failed the tip and middle test, do any of these things look familiar? There are more examples. These are just the most common, right? So if that's you, say, that is me. I have trouble with egg vowels or whatever it is. Yeah. Or boy, that inhale, exhale thing just really hit me in my heart. Yeah. Or if you pass the middle and tip test, congratulations, but you failed the posterior test. Oh, do you have trouble with keeping spin in the high notes? Do you have trouble with pelvic floor? Looking at you, particularly women, particularly post-pregnancy women. Yeah. Do you have like some vocal health issues? Do you have some soft palate issues? If that's you, say, that's me. And if you're brave enough to say, yeah, I always hate that NG position. I never understood why everyone thinks NG is such a great position for the tongue because I hate it and it's stupid and I don't use it in my studio. Oh, maybe now we know why. Yeah, so throw some comments into the chat. These are always fascinating to see. When I had my tongue tie, like I mentioned, mine were pitch accuracy in the passaggio. Oh, forget about it. I would fall like minor thirds flat. Crazy. I had a lot of jawing. I had a lot of anterior pain, and I also had absolutely no pelvic floor connection. So I had middle and posterior symptoms. Again, you may just have one or the other. If you failed the tip and middle test, remember you still have a posterior tie, so you may also have some of those symptoms as well, right? And again, there are more examples of this. And in fact, we're going to talk about it later in my part 2. We're going to talk about how this affects your whole body as a human. Fascinating. But for now, let's just stick to these things. Or if you're really brave and you're like, you know, I failed the tip and middle test, but I also struggle with XYZ and you didn't mention that. Could that be a tongue tie thing? Put that in the chat because I love reading those. Usually, yeah, it's a thing. Great. Okay, so I just want to remind you one more time, if you're like, oh my God, I have a tongue tie, I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out. Don't freak out. They are common. They're not normal, but they're common. Oh, let's all just take a deep breath. Great. Now, a lot of people say, well, why hasn't anyone told me that I have a tongue tie? And you know what? I wish that we could have told you sooner. I wish that the community, that the world could have told you sooner. But there's a lot of reasons, and these are really kind of the big ones. The first is that we haven't really changed how we talk about tongue tie until the past like 10 years or so. Namely, really in the last 5 years. It used to be that tongue ties were just, do you have a lisp? No, okay, great. And that was it. And obviously, a lot of these things are way beyond just having a lisp, right? Also, a lot of the research that's going on right now, it's really focused around babies, infants, and speech because that pays the bills. New moms will do anything for baby, whereas 40 to 50-year-old people don't really care about taking care of themselves in the human community. So that's why a lot of research is centered on this. If you go down the tongue tie rabbit hole yourself, you will find tons of things about babies. Babies. And there's not really good things to find about adults. There's a few, namely some about sleep apnea, because that also pays a lot of bills. So I have references to that on my website as well. If you really struggle sleeping and you also failed the tongue tie test, yeah, that's a thing, okay? And also, because of all this, there's just kind of a general lack of awareness in the vocal community, not for any negative reason, although there are some. But yeah, I mean, we just aren't really aware of it. So now that you know, shout it from the mountaintops. We need to bring this to more people's attention. And also, we talked about this at the beginning, but people have a sort of lack of personal awareness because a lot of these symptoms of tongue tie are attributed to poor technique, or singers don't practice, or my students not understanding what I'm saying to them. There's even things where people are focused on their tongue tension, and so they don't realize that their poor soft palate is the same thing as their tongue tension. So all of these unconscious and unknown compensations, people just assume that it's something to do with them, and it is in an anatomical way. Yeah. So I just like to give this little cartoon here because it just so perfectly encapsulates what we're talking about. So two fish meet up and they say, hey, how's it going? The other one says, oh, you know, pretty good. How's the water? And the fish says, what's water? And I just love that because if you have the awareness of this, it's very obvious how it's affecting you. And if you have no awareness of it and you're totally oblivious, you have no idea all of the repercussions that may be going on in you or your students' bodies. So it's really important that we talk about it with people. So I just want to go back through and just sort of like re-jog your memory of some of the people that we saw today and some of the things that they said about before and after their tongue tie releases, just so that we can really nail the poignancy of this home. Let's do it.
I felt as if a lifelong, subtle, but chronic trauma that I'd been living with my whole life had just dissolved away. And that was really striking to me, that the day after, I just had under my tongue snipped and my cheeks, inside my cheeks and my lips, that what was the most overwhelming, because there was a little bit of soreness, what was so overwhelming was that this thing that I lived with my whole life, that was just this subtle grabbing in my body, just was gone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're so welcome. You're so welcome.
Very excited. I'm very nervous, obviously, but I'm really excited because this has helped already so much.
Right away about my speaking is different, and my singing as well. The air doesn't stop. I still didn't sing a lot, but I noticed the difference, right? But when people say that my talking is different, so.
Oh, wow, that's.
So it's like in 3 weeks it disappears without me. I mean, I was speaking, but I was by no means being conservative with my voice use.
Vocally, gosh, I literally have goosebumps. That's just wild.
It's wild.
I don't actually really know the real reason why certain things didn't work before, because I had the tie. I mean, we've talked about this before, but I'm just like kind of going for it, you know? And I have this like precariousness about any pitches in my passaggio that is like deeply ingrained. So I just need to teach my body, like, it's okay now. Like, you don't have to be walking on thin ice on it. Yeah. The old room is tight, kind of locked up and kind of shoved in.
Yeah,
shoved. Allowing it to be propelled and like trusting that it will land, giving it the chance to land, you know? Like I wasn't doing that before. I can take a more uniform color up higher now than I could before. Before I had to like shift a lot of gears, and I don't have to drive as manually anymore.
So with having tongue tension and having tongue spasms, they went away instantly, gone. Nothing. Singing right out of surgery, and I did some vocalization. But what I've noticed in my case is that all the muscles that I used to, I guess, essentially vocalize anything on the scale that I would need to, don't work anymore, because it was all here. And now I can't hold tension if I tried here, which is a blessing and a curse, because now I don't know what to do. So I have to relearn things, which is great. I'm very happy to be here and to learn these. It feels better to exist this way, like a normal person. So I'm very excited about that.
So I love what my client Elijah there says at the end. I couldn't hold tension if I tried, and I may have to relearn some things, but it feels much better to exist this way, like a normal person. And you may have caught some of the other things that people say. Before, I had to drive a manual car. There were lots of gear shifts, right? I had this resting tension and trauma released from my body. These are all very common words and very common phrasings that people use, and it's no coincidence that it's happening. So if you catch any of these phrases in your singers, this is a great time for us to bring tongue ties to their attention. So if you're feeling like this, congratulations, you're now part of the tongue tie awareness community. Now you do have quite a big responsibility. We need to talk about it, because if you're feeling like, wow, no one ever told me about this, yes, that's why you need to talk about it with everybody else. Let's change the world. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. This really can change people's lives and people's worlds, and it really is so incredibly important. So you should now understand how tongue ties create compensations and vocal issues and health issues, some red flags that we can spot in singers, both in ourselves and in others, why tongue tie assessment is absolutely critical and foundational for every singer's technique across all genres, across all ages, across all disciplines. Yes. And finally, how intervention is simple and easy and brief and can change people's entire careers and entire lives. So if you're like this later tonight, thinking about tongue ties, I'm sorry, but that is common. Don't worry, you're not alone. I sleep like that very often. So if you can't sleep tonight or tomorrow, I have some very simple next steps for you. If you are tongue-tied, what should you do next? Explore the rabbit hole. Explore what else is down there. We touched on some things like sleep apnea, if you suffer from that, or body tension, pelvic floor issues. There's lots of information out there that you can find, especially on my website. You can read more before and after experiences. I have tons of those on my YouTube. You can read some science and articles. I also have references to that. You can start talking to a tongue tie expert, someone like myself, or even a dentist, and see if you can get some specific answers to you. Preferably, again, I prefer that you guys talk to a myofunctional therapist first, because they will have 1, more time to give you, 2, are usually cheaper, and 3, because you really need someone like that in your corner. And you can explore with them how your specific tongue tie is affecting you, both as a singer and as a normal human. If you're suspicious of one of your students, give them a tongue tie test, the assessment that we just did together, right? That whole 4-step process takes 90 seconds. That 90 seconds is going to save you a lot of pain and suffering later, I guarantee it. Yeah. And you can just briefly talk about it with them, bring it to their attention. You don't have to convince them to go get surgery. We don't need to do anything like that. They usually love to do their own research anyway. They'll usually find specific articles or even like personal stories that they find really relatable. Again, I have tons of those on my website, but they're also all around the world, everywhere on YouTube. There's tons of examples of this. And then if they choose not to go forward with their tongue tie release, that's great. We can adjust our approach of teaching based on what we know that they can physically accomplish and what they can't. And it creates a much more like welcoming and cherishable working environment. So here's my website, myofullsingers.com, tongue-tiedsingers.com. I have tons of free resources on there. If you want something and you can't find it, let me know, but I highly doubt it because it's full of stuff. There's PubMed articles, there's tongue tie tests, Also, I will now and forever offer free consults with myself for all singers because you guys are that important to me. So if you're interested in that, you can find that there. I have tons of free programs. You can check all that out. And then if you wanted to work with me, or if you just have some more questions about this, here's my email. Please feel free to reach out to me. I love questions. I have lots of programs on my website that you can do private with me. You can do DIY programs. I have an app. I have tons of stuff. Again, check it out on your own time. I am currently conducting vocal research right now, spectrometry and like vocal affiliations, fascinating. And I also have links to other experts beyond just myself. If you don't want to work with me, but you want to make sure that you're getting really great care, I have a whole list of people that I very highly recommend, surgeons from all around the world. You can check that out as well.